So hello and welcome, I'm Frederick Dunn, and today I'm responding to a couple of questions. About what? Well, about the European hornet, which you're seeing right here, and the bald-faced hornet, black and white, and their comparison to bees, honeybees, and other wasps, for example. So in this video, not only am I going to show you this large and only North American hornet, but we're also going to show how they compete, how they compare. Which one can dominate at a feeding station? Well, dominate over what? Well, there are lots of wasps out there aside from these. Hornets are wasps. All wasps are not hornets. And so we're going to show what happens when they all feed together at the same location. Does one dominate over the other? This is the bald-faced hornet. Bald-faced slant, not a hornet. It's really just a wasp. It gets that name, a common name. But it is not like Vespa crowbro, which we opened with. This one is just a wasp. But it's mean, don't get me wrong. When these things are in nests and you encounter them out in the wild, if you ruffle their feathers and get into their zone, they come after you. So you might be wondering, how do they compete? For example, if we put out a feeding station somewhere, what about the bald-faced hornet? How does it stack up against, I don't know, regular yellow jackets? And people like to classify things differently, and often, and the reason for making this video, I'll see people say, look at these bees. Look at the big yellow bee there. Or even worse, look at that Asian giant hornet, aka the murder hornet. It's not. It's just a European hornet. They're all over the United States. And I did say in the opening that it's the only hornet in North America. We do have the Asian giant hornet in Canada, but it was in the northwestern part of the United States for a while, but it's gone now. So this is the only one for now. And I hope you'll take the opportunity to look it over, see how impressive they are. Because when I see these out and about, I'm not that concerned, to be honest. If you know why, they're really not that defensive. They live in trees and hollows and cutouts and things like that. And I've actually stood right in front of their nest before, the openings in a tree, and made videos and watched them for extended periods of time and not been attacked at all. Now, here we are at a feeding station. Now I had to set up the feeding station at a time when we still have honey supers on in the backyard aviary. So what am I putting out at the feeding station? That's right, capped honey. So this is food. This is a resource that's stored by honeybees in their nests. So everything you're looking at here, the comb is made by this little honeybee. Not just the one, of course, thousands of them working together, which is how honeybees prevail. So I'll tell you in advance, spoiler alert, honeybees are actually the top dogs at the feeding station, and not because they can engage in single combat with hornets and wasps and prevail, but because in numbers alone, they will take up the slack and drive others away. Look at this black insect right here. What is that? That's a honeybee also. Compare the lower left to the one in the top right. They're both honeybees. So even honeybees come in different types, right? So different genetic lines. Now we have a perfect layout here. Look at the yellow jackets too. People like to paint with a broad brush and say, yellow jacket wasps, they're in the ground, they're in the tree, they're in the wall, they're under your siding. But the truth is there are a lot of different species of yellow jackets also. Did you know that? Here's the bald-faced hornet again. Hopefully you won't run into these out in the wild. And while we're talking, I should mention where I am. The state of Pennsylvania, northwestern part of the state of Pennsylvania. And so what I like to do sometimes is put resources out like this capped honeycomb and see what comes to it. Because then I can look them over at my leisure. I can sit and stare at them for a long time. We can really get a close look at the anatomy of that bald-faced hornet, by the way. Look at these yellow jackets. And there are differences. These are not bees, no matter what you've seen or heard elsewhere. Honeybees are what we normally see. And there are lots of other actual bees. Can you name one? How about bumblebees? How would they fare? How do they stack up in the lineup for competition for resources? Well, we're going to see bumblebees in here too. So you are going to see, we've already seen the European hornet, the bald-faced hornet. Again, I'd like to refresh you, it's not a hornet. And yellow jackets, so those are wasps. And then we have two bees that we're going to show here. The honeybee right there on the left. And we're going to show bumblebees. And you might think a bumblebee is a bumblebee. Well, carpenter bees, for example, that's a bumblebee. Do you know that there are 14 different species of bumblebees in my state? That's right. How many total bee species do you think? Well, there are 423 native bee species here. Maybe more, but at least that many. And we don't see those at feeding stations like this. But we do see most of the wasps. So you're probably wondering, what kind of wasp was that right there? Of course, this is the honeybee, the fuzzy honeybee that we all know and love. I like to have them around. I keep them, actually, in beehives. So I like to know what they're competing with. This is a honeybee forager, by the way. How long is she going to live? About 2 weeks now that she's out foraging. 6 weeks total. Look at this on the left. Bumblebee. Look at the way it's holding out its little legs. It's fending off anything else from bothering it while it eats this honey that was stored by honeybees in the comb constructed by honeybees, made out of beeswax, hexagonal cells. So the honeybee is reclaiming what its own species makes. Now look at that yellow patch on the hind leg of this bumblebee. What is that? It's pollen. One of the distinctions between bees and wasps. Wasps don't collect pollen on their hind legs this way. Wasps do not feed their babies, their developing larvae, pollen. Honeybees do, bumblebees do. In fact, we could say that honeybees and bumblebees are pretty much vegetarians. And then we could say that the wasps, which are not honeybees or bees of any kind, they're vespula. So they collect meat along with sugar. Now this honey is going to provide carbohydrates for all of them. So whether that's the common ground, let's start there. Wasps and bees of all species need nectar. They need sucrose. They need carbohydrates. That provides energy for the motors that they have, which is in their thorax. They're all insects. So if you look at the head of this bumblebee with its proboscis sticking out and its tongue, exploiting the resources hard earned by the honeybees. This thing's covered in fur. Wasps do not have fur all over them, hair all over them. That honeybee top right there. So you know it has millions of hairs on its body. Now, wasps, when we look at them up close, they do have some hair, but they're not pollinators. And then people will be offended and say, but they certainly pollinate while they're visiting flowers, stealing the nectar, but not very meaningfully. So in other words, the bees, all of them, are pollinators. Some of them are specialists. Now, yellow jackets like the ones we're looking at here, they are annoying. Today is September the 8th, by the way. Try to have a picnic on a nice hot day, and you'll see a lot of these wasp species hanging around you trying to get to the meat that you've put out even. Pieces of bologna. You look over and they're being chewed on by a wasp. What if I told you the wasp can't even eat the bologna? It can't. It's just chewing it up, collecting bits and pieces of it. But it takes it back and its larvae can eat the meat. That's right. But they need energy. So here's the thing. Near the end of the year, right? So we're entering into the second week of September. And it's cold right now. You can't tell it looking at this screen, but it's only in the 50s. That's right. And I want to share with you that on the face of this capped honey, it's cold and covered with wasps. And the wasps can fly and do fly and forage and take resources while it's colder. And the honeybees, they come out later. So I'm going to tell you ahead of time that by the end of this video, you're going to notice a shift here on the surface of this honeycomb. You're going to notice that the honeybees take over. This bald-faced hornet, yeah, she's a big deal on her own, one-to-one. Look at her eating that honey, by the way. You know, it takes 11 bees their entire lifetime foraging to produce about a teaspoon of honey. That's a lot of work. And who's benefiting from that hard work right now? The bald-faced hornet right there, that's who. And the yellow jackets. Another thing that I like to do when I set these out is you'll see that the Vespula, like the eastern yellow jacket, or the German yellow jacket, or the southern yellow jacket, or even what's known as the common yellow jacket, and then of course this bald-faced hornet, they're more than willing to rob others' resources, and they'll rob honeybee hives if they can. So what I want to share about that is for the beekeepers out there, this doesn't happen instantly. As you can see, there's hundreds of wasps attacking this open capped comb of honey. It takes them all day. They don't even get a third of it. I'll say that ahead of time. So it takes them a long time to completely rob out a colony of bees, which may have 100 pounds of stored capped honey in it. So it's up to the beekeeper to be aware of that and get out there and reduce those entrances and keep these robbers outside. Let them go and get their own resources. And you may want to put something out to attract some wasps so you can get a close look. I caution you not to put out sugar syrup until later in the year, and the reason for that is, again, some beekeepers in your area may have what's called honey supers on their hives, and we don't want processed sugar going into those honey supers. So for now, if you're going to put something out, make sure it's capped honey like this. Look at that. That's all beeswax with honey stored in those cells. The cells are hexagonal, and you can see that. And by the way, look at how much trouble these fancy wasps have trying to get through just the wax cappings so they can get in and exploit the resources inside those cells. They're not very well equipped to do it. They have little meat carving mandibles that we're going to show you up really close later on. And their tongues are pretty inadequate too. Their tongues are kind of feathery looking. They don't stick out very far. I would have to say that the master of the long tongue in this video today is going to go to the bumblebee. And that's a honeybee right there. I'm going to show you these things over and over because I want it in your mind that these right here are Vespula. These are wasps. These are not bees. These are not honeybees. Look how smooth their bodies are. Look how sleek their bodies are. Look at those markings on their abdomens. Now this cute little honeybee with the fuzz all over it, and the fuzzy thorax, and the cute face. Compare that to this. Not cute faces. Black and yellow, striking, clean thorax markings. It looks like an alien face, like an alien wearing a helmet with goggles on. Look at the abdomens, look at those teardrop markings. And if you want to really challenge yourself, look them up and try to figure out which of those are which. Bald-faced hornet again. Also known as the bull hornet. The bull hornet even. Common names, not a hornet. I'm just going to say that over and over because even today a lot of people think they are, but it's just a wasp. In fact, it's in the yellow jacket family. Now here's something interesting too. Did you know that there's a Pennsylvania yellow jacket? And I'm right here in the state of Pennsylvania. Did you know that thing is not even found in Pennsylvania? That's right, Vespula pennsylvanica is not actually found in the state. It's found in the Midwest and the Western United States. I'm showing you a sky shot because this is not a nice day. Look at that, 57 degrees Fahrenheit at 11:13 in the morning. Not good. But I just want to reiterate that weather like this favors the wasps and the hornets, which means they can raid other bees. So as we get through this, and yes, it's a 39-minute video, I want you to guess every time you see something up on screen, what is that? Name it. Well, those are bald-faced hornets cooperating. And even with those big meat-cutting mandibles and their impressive physical prowess, look at them. They're so stout. They're so strong. They're so aggressive. They really, really are. Now, how can I get so close to them? How can I make a video and not be stung? Let's talk about their stingers while we're discussing that. That cute honeybee lower right there stings you one time. The stinger comes out of its abdomen. The stinger continues to pump its venom into you, separate from the bee, and the bee dies for sure. Now, the bald-faced hornets on the left, their stingers come out too. And they can sting you over and over and inject venom into you over and over and not die. So, that's another trait there. What if a bumblebee stung you? Bumblebees can sting you over and over also. So, which ones are best equipped to get the honey out of these cells? Well, probably the ones that built the cells in the first place, like the honeybee here, lower right. They build the cells based on their own physical body dimensions. Their heads can fit in there. Their tongues can reach all the way to the bottom of the cell once they stick their thorax and head in. And these wasps can't. These bald-faced hornets, they can't fit their bodies into the cell. Now, the smaller wasps, the eastern yellowjacket, the German yellowjacket, the southern yellowjacket, and the common yellowjacket can all go right into the cells. But for some reason, they're not very efficient at chewing off the caps. Keep in mind, it's cold out. Now, once the sun really comes up and the temperatures rise, the wax cappings are softened. And then the honeybees can chew them with their mandibles. And so can the wasps, but for some reason they're just not good at it, or they're lazy. I don't know which. Look at this bumblebee over here, hard at work. They have nice mandibles too, designed to work plant material. They don't chew dead animals the way these bald-faced hornets do. That's right, they chew on dead animals. Highway pizza, they call it. You can find a dead animal in the worst condition in the woods somewhere, and you'll find wasps raiding it for the meat protein. Look at that, look, using its mandibles in a rude way. Now we're building this up because this honeybee, not this honeybee, that's a bumblebee, but look how it spreads its legs apart, has its little guard feet out, just wants to be left alone, takes up the whole cell, sticking its head in there because it can't fit its body in, or it would go in all the way. But its tongue is really long and can reach the bottom, and they can collect these resources really fast. Now, the wasp that's right next to it there would love nothing more than to get right into that cell with that bumblebee and get that honey. But it can't. You ever see someone put up a picture of getting a high five from a bumblebee? If you find a bumblebee in your yard on a piece of honeycomb like this, and it's got its head buried, and you touch it with your finger, its little leg will flip out just like that, and you'll think you got a high five too. Look at the close-up of this bald-faced hornet. That's what I want you to have an opportunity to do. Get acquainted with them. Don't be afraid of them, actually. When they're out and about and they're foraging, that same is true for almost every stinging insect. While they're out and about, they won't come after you. If they're in your face, they're inspecting. They have terrible vision, by the way. So they have to look at you really close to recognize who you are, see if they remember you. Just like honeybees, they have 5 eyes. Did you know that? 2 large compound eyes. We can see those right here. But you see the little black shiny dots that are between those big eyes? There's 3 of them. Those are ocella. Those are simple eyes, which means they have 5 eyes. That's right. And just like bees, they have 6 legs. And they have 3 main body parts. You'd think they'd be the same. This is a close-up. Look at those eyes. I want you to see everything. Where did the antenna come out, by the way? On the front of the face. Those people that walk around with the antennas on top of their heads, they're missing the mark. Bees and wasps, their antennae, think of it as their nose. It comes out right where their nose should be. They don't have a nose because they have an exoskeleton. They smell with those antennae. And of course their feet, the segments, everything looks very similar. But look at the lack of hair on the thorax. It's because they're not cuddly, they're not friendly, they're not your friend. They're here to get your stuff. And if you don't like it, they'll sting you while they're at it. Look at the mandibles, and you can see they're designed to cut flesh. Look at that, they're serrated. They can bite each other. Now in the beginning we had the European hornet. I've seen a European hornet fly up and take the head and thorax off of a bald-faced hornet like this without giving it a thought, just because it was in the way, and then it went ahead and ate sugar syrup or something and left. So it cut this bald-faced hornet apart just in passing. They don't like each other. They don't get along. But look at these striking markings on the thorax. Once you see it, once you know it, you won't forget it. So, what else can I tell you about it? The honey, by the way, that they're eating at this robbing station is what the honeybees need to get themselves through winter. So, the honeybees are hoarders. They collect nectar all summer long, every day that they can possibly fly. And they carry it in their honey crop, in their abdomen. And there's a valve there that protects it from going into their digestive system. And they bring that honey, that nectar, unfinished honey, let's call it, back to the hive. And then they pass it on to other bees inside the hive, and those bees pass it on to other bees, and then they put it in storage. They put it in cells. But when they transfer it from bee to bee, while it's in their honey crops and so on, they invert the sugar. So instead of sucrose, which is what nectar from most flowers has, they end up storing it as fructose and glucose, and they turn it into honey. And it has a distinct flavor and a distinct smell associated with the floral source that they get it from. Look at the tattered wings on this forager honeybee. She is working herself to death. And remember I said, they live about 6 weeks total. From the time they hatch as an egg, they go into a development stage inside the hive where they're considered larvae, then they get capped over, and then they're pupa, and then on the 21st day, they emerge from that cell, and now they're adult honeybees. So there are no baby honeybees. When you see a really tiny bee out and about, it's another species. So the honeybees spend 6 weeks working inside the hive for about the first 4. They have a bunch of jobs they go through. Then when they're mature and tough enough, they go out on the landing board. They might be a guard bee for a while, and then they fly out and they forage. Look at those wasps again. I want you to notice something as this video progresses. The numbers of bees that are present, the honeybees, is increasing. The yellow jacket wasps are not going to like this. Because what the honeybees do is what you're seeing right here. They get together, shoulder to shoulder, head to head, thorax to thorax. And they crowd out other insects, and they don't let them feed where they're feeding. And even honeybees, let's be honest, they're lazy. Because they'll wait for one of their sisters to chew open a capping, and then they'll all shove their proboscises in there. I don't know what the plural for proboscis are. Proboscis, I don't know. But they all stick their tongues in there together, and they'll empty the cells pretty darn fast. And then they'll wait for another one of their sisters to start to chew open a capping, and then they'll shove their noses in there, their proboscis and their tongues, and they'll get in there and they'll clean out those cells. So even, by the way, honeybees are better at robbing other honeybees than wasps are. So let's slow it down. I want you to see how they fly. I want you to see their legs, by the way. Let's do that. Look at the legs on the honeybees. The hind legs are kind of flat and paddle-shaped. They're thicker than the hind legs on wasps. Why? Because they carry pollen on their hind legs, and wasps don't. So wasps don't need a thick hind leg. Now, when you look at the wasps, you're going to see sharp little points on their hind legs and also on their middle 2 legs. And that's because they jab those things into the animals that they collect, the meat protein they pick up, and they carry it back home. So the honeybees carry pollen on their hind legs, and they have a little pollen press back there that they push it into, and it makes these little globs, and it's called corbicula, the part of the leg that holds it. And they take that back, and that becomes bee bread. So the carbohydrate that they have, which comes from the honey, that gives them the energy they need, of course. And the pollen that you'll see on some of the bees, not on this sequence, but the bumblebee, of course, had it, they take back to feed their larvae. So wasps collect meat protein and take it back to their brood, and the honeybees are vegetarian, so they bring back pollen for their brood. Remember what I said before? Look at this bumblebee completely occupying the cell. Look at the pressure from these yellow jackets. They want some of that so bad. And bumblebees, this isn't even a big one, by the way. I don't even know which of the 14 bumblebee species this is, but they're stubborn. They're tough. And it's keeping them out. I mean, they're just a bunch of freeloaders. Remember, they'll bite at the feet, they'll bite at the wings, they'll do annoying things, but they won't be as cool as the European hornet that can show up and just bite things in half. And look, now that it's left, they all rush in there to get some of what's left. Nothing. There's no more nectar in there because that bumblebee is very efficient. Good luck chewing your own cappings there, yellow jackets. So we see too that these cappings have some of it's light colored, some of it's dark colored. Most of the light colored capping is because there's air under it there, and others the capping is in direct contact with the honey. Sometimes it's also a little more light in color because there's thicker beeswax on it. Where do they get that beeswax, by the way? I know you want to know that too. They make it. That's right. That's another thing that they use their own honey for. They consume the honey. They produce beeswax, the worker bees do at certain stages of their lives. And they have wax glands where? On their abdomen, the underside. They have 4 pairs, which means they have 8 wax glands, which means these little shingles of wax come out under their abdomens on a nice warm day, and they build cool things like this honeycomb. And they also build the capping wax there. So when the honey is filling the cell, and they've dried it down to right around 18% water, and that protects it forever and ever, they cap it. They put their own lid on it. So this is the storehouse here. Now this is a surplus frame. I don't want you to think that I robbed a beehive and took their valuable winter resources and put it out just to make a video, because I didn't. I already had it in storage. It's surplus. So honeybees here in the state of Pennsylvania, normal size colony, they need about 45 pounds of this, 45 to 50, let's say, to get them through winter. So the rest is surplus. That's where beekeepers end up taking the surplus, uncapping it, spinning it out, running it through a very mild filter, depending on how much processing they want to do, and then it ends up in jars. And I just want you to appreciate how much work was involved, how many flowers had to be visited in order to provide you with a simple teaspoon of honey for your tea. So also I want you to notice the honeybees, remember I said earlier, look a little different. They are. So there are lines. There are genetic strains of honeybees that do really well in cold climates. For example, and the really dark bees that we see seem to do the best. Now honeybees, you might be wondering, if there are a total of 437 species of bees in the state of Pennsylvania, what about native bees? Honeybees don't count. They're not native. See, they were brought in by people. They were brought to the United States. They were called the white man's fly back in the day by the Native Americans. And they didn't even know the extent that we would be able to depend on and use resources produced by honeybees. We didn't even think about pollination, by the way. I think they needed beeswax for candles back in the day. Thank goodness we don't need candles anymore, because it takes a lot of beeswax. By the way, it takes a lot of honey to make just a couple ounces of wax. A lot. That's why if they're building new comb and things like that, they're spending a lot of their resources and energy building it back up if we remove it. So what we do as beekeepers is we uncap it, and then we extract the honey out of it, and then we let bees clean it up like these are doing right here, and then we put it back in the hive and let the bees refill it without having to build brand new comb. And then all they have to do is fill it with honey, and then they just make new cap wax there. That's why the cap wax is the most valuable wax in the beehive from the honey supers. It's in demand. It's good stuff. It's pure. It comes from flowers. It's amazing when you think of it that way. Some people refer to honey as bottled sunshine, because the sunshine makes, of course, the flowers that then again, you get it. They have nectaries. They have pollinanthers. I hope you're enjoying listening to the bees. But look at, by the way, all the different yellow jackets that are here. If you're studying yellow jackets right now, you could freeze frame it and try to identify the different species here. Another thing probably I should share is that the only insects in the series here that have the same nest year after year. Which one do you think it is? Do you think it's the yellow jacket wasp? Same nest over and over, year after year, state of Pennsylvania? Do you think it's the European hornet because they're so big? They have a perennial nest that they occupy and use year after year? Or is it the bald-faced hornet? They have those big paper nests that hang in trees. They're considered an aerial wasp, by the way. Let's take another look at that bald-faced hornet. Look at how they're equipped for life. Pretty darn good. But no, only one of them actually has a nest that they use year after year, and that's the honeybee. So honeybees use cavities that are long-lasting, not a paper nest, an actual cavity made out of wood. Usually it would be in a tree. I don't know what goes on in your neck of the woods, but we've had lumbering operations come through, and they take down every tree that's more than 10 inches in diameter. So if we didn't have beehives and places for our honeybees to raise their brood and store their resources and build their infrastructure, the honeycomb, our bees would be in trouble trying to find a place to live. And hopefully it won't be in someone's wall or someone's attic. So the other thing is, these wasps, when they make a nest, what's it made out of? Cellulose. They have to go and chew on unfinished wood, dry wood, dead wood. Sometimes you'll see the European hornets chewing on dried out sunflowers and things like that. And they use that cellulose and they mix it with their saliva and they make their paper nests from it. And so being a paper nest, not very good at insulating, by the way, so when winter comes, they die out, except they've made a bunch of queens at the end of the year. And they also make a bunch of drones. What's a drone? It's a male wasp. So the drones mate with their queens, that's right, all from the same mother. And the queens go off and find their spot under some wood and some moss, under some humus, and they survive the winter. So this is why, as we get to the end of the year, the demand for carbohydrates skyrockets with the hornets and wasps because they're fattening up. They're storing resources in their own bodies because they have to get out there and survive winter on their own, and it could be a long winter. Here it goes about 6 months. And then in the spring, the queens that were made in those wasp nests are the future generations of wasps. Each one starts out in spring, starts its own paper nest, lays its eggs. Those eggs hatch, those larvae grow, and they become adult wasps, and they take over those duties, and the queen in that paper nest continues to produce eggs all summer long. And this is why it surprises a lot of people at the end of the year that there are these big wasp nests in trees at the time when the leaves start to fall. Well, the wasp nest has been there all summer long. It's just bigger now. And I hope you discover it by looking for birds or something. I hope they don't discover you. Like when you're weed whacking or mowing your yard or walking around. Some yellow jackets make their holes in the ground. They're excavators. They pick up the dirt in those mandibles and they haul it out. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, there's a hole in the ground with hundreds, if not thousands, of wasps coming out of it, and they're coming after you because you vibrated the ground, and they don't like it, and they can sting you. Remember what I said? A honeybee stings you once and dies. But these yellow jackets sting you over and over again, and in big numbers. By the way, did you know that when they sting you, they're also marking you with an alarm pheromone, so the other wasps know exactly who to sting and where to sting? Now look, I don't know what happened here. One of the yellow jackets is in a cell, but it looks like one of the other wasps went around and damaged its abdomen. You can even see the little stinger sticking out a little bit there. There it is. You can look at the very bottom right, but this thing is really injured. So one of the things you may be wondering is, do they feel pain? I say they don't. They definitely have reactions to being touched or being in proximity or being grabbed by another animal. But as far as whether or not they feel pain, I'm not so sure, because they seem to move as if nothing has happened. That's a chicken that just laid an egg, and she's bragging about it, of course. And now we have two bald-faced hornets biting at this wasp, and its legs are still moving, its antennae are still moving, and I actually, stopped videoing. Because what's stored in its abdomen, by the way, the honey, the nectar that's been gathering, so there are resources, again, that are ready for other wasps to consume. And there's another wasp here that I'm going to show you that also lets you know that they don't really have much concern about pain or injury. And that's because one of the bald-faced hornets is actually missing a big section of its right front leg. And I want you to see if you can spot it. But here again, look what's happened. I'll bet without even looking at a thermometer, you can tell that it's over 60 degrees Fahrenheit right now. And look at the face of this honeycomb. It's covered in bees. Do you remember at the beginning of the video, there were more wasps than anything else? And that's because it was in the 50s. And now that these honeybees have flown back to their hives, they did their waggle dances and demonstrated to the other bees exactly where this resource is. Because you don't put something like this out right in your backyard apiary. You put it well away from them so that you're not ringing the dinner bell next to some hive that later will have to defend all these hungry insects that will be coming for those resources. But now that it's warmer, honeybees dominate. And it's not because they have flesh-cutting mandibles. They don't. I mean, they can bite. They're not good at it. I've seen them give it all they have and bite the legs and wings of other insects, and I see those insects fly away without any damage. But what they're doing is what we described earlier. They're shoulder to shoulder. They don't leave any room for other insects. Look, there's a couple of yellow jackets in here, but they really only have access to the cells that the honeybees are finished with. So the honeybees just push themselves in so tight that nothing else is going to get in there but another honeybee, because they've got those long tongues. And they can all get the resources. The other thing is, they don't spread out all over the face of the honeycomb and consume it all at different cells at different times. They all move together and migrate across the comb in a cluster. Now this is what they do in the wintertime too. They move up through their honeycomb in a cluster over the comb, and they consume it. I hope you found this presentation interesting. I'm really hoping you might have learned a thing or two. And we have to, of course, recognize our actors in today's presentation. One-on-one, the king of all of them, without a doubt, is the European hornet, the only true resident hornet in the United States. She's bigger, she's armored, Vespa Crabro. She's it. One-on-one. But when it comes to the numbers and the work that's really being done, it's the honeybees. And of course, we have to recognize probably the meanest wasp you can find in the environment anywhere. And that's, of course, the bald-faced hornet. That thing will come after you if you're going near its nest. They fly at night. They're not friendly. You'll be stung. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something.